You want mental strength fast. You want it packaged, downloaded, injected into your bloodstream like a drug. That's why you don't have it. Your generation is addicted to shortcuts, and shortcuts create weak men. I'm going to tell you something that will offend you immediately. If mental strength came quickly, you'd already have it. The fact you don't is proof that you've avoided pain, not that life is unfair. You've been lied to. You think confidence is a mood, discipline is a switch, and toughness is something you turn on when it's convenient. Wrong. Mental strength is not an emotion. It's a structure, and structures are built brick by brick, under pressure, over time. Anyone chasing fast results is broadcasting one thing to the world: they're fragile. Here's the part most men can't handle. Mental strength grows slowly because it's forged through repetition, boredom, and resistance, not excitement, not hype. Repetition. Doing the same hard thing when there's no applause, no validation, no adrenaline rush. Every day you show up when your mind is screaming for comfort. You are training it to obey you. That's how authority is built, internally first. Let me explain something most people misunderstand. Speaking in tongues. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about developing an internal language that weak people don't understand. When you're mentally strong, you stop speaking in emotions and start speaking in commands. Your inner voice doesn't negotiate. It issues orders. You don't ask yourself how you feel. You tell yourself what will happen. That's a different language. Most men never learn it because they quit before fluency. At first, that internal language feels awkward, forced, unnatural. Good. That's the point. You're overriding years of weakness, excuses, and self-pity. Every time you force discipline when comfort is available, you're reprogramming your identity, slowly, painfully, permanently. There is no shortcut to identity change. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling lies to losers. Mental strength is dominance over self. And dominance takes time because resistance doesn't disappear, it escalates. As you level up, the pressure increases, the boredom deepens, the loneliness grows. That's not a flaw in the process. That is the process. Weak men interpret resistance as a sign to stop. Strong men recognize it as proof they're doing something right. You don't build a powerful mind by winning once. You build it by surviving thousands of moments where quitting would have been easier. Each time you don't quit, something invisible but permanent locks into place. You become less emotional, less reactive, more controlled. That's why mental strength looks calm, not loud. Loud men are compensating. Here's the brutal truth no one wants to say out loud. Most men don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they're impatient. They want the result without the transformation. They want the power without the obedience. But power only comes to men who can control themselves when nobody is watching and nothing feels rewarding. Mental strength is not something you stumble upon one day like hidden talent. It is not waiting inside you to be unlocked when the timing feels right. That belief is weak and it keeps men passive. If mental strength were natural, if it appeared automatically with age or desire, the world would be full of composed, disciplined, unshakable men. It isn't. That alone should tell you the truth. Strength is constructed, not discovered, and construction requires labor. Most men secretly believe they are already strong and just need the right moment to prove it. That's why they wait. They wait for motivation, for confidence, for circumstances to line up. Waiting is not neutrality, it is decay. While you wait, your mind is being trained in the opposite direction. It is learning avoidance, comfort seeking, and excuse making. Every day without deliberate pressure makes you softer, not the same. Mental strength is trained the same way physical dominance is trained. You don't walk into a gym once and come out powerful. You repeat uncomfortable movements until your body adapts. The mind works no differently. It adapts to whatever you expose it to consistently. If you expose it to resistance, it becomes resilient. If you expose it to ease, it becomes fragile. There is no third option. Here's what most people get wrong. They think training the mind means thinking positively or hyping themselves up. That's fantasy. Mental strength is built through action that contradicts emotion. It's waking up when you don't feel like it. It's staying focused when boredom hits. It's executing when your internal voice starts offering you escape routes. Every time you override that voice, you are placing another brick in the structure of your mind. One action does nothing. 10 actions do little. Hundreds of actions change your baseline. Thousands of actions change who you are. This is why mental strength cannot be rushed. The nervous system, the habits, the internal dialogue, all of it needs repetition to rewire. Anyone promising instant toughness is selling entertainment, not results. Look closely at men who claim they are mentally strong but crack under pressure. They talk big, but they haven't trained. They relied on personality, intelligence, or past wins. Those things collapse the moment real discomfort shows up. Trained strength doesn't. Trained strength stays functional when things go wrong. That's the difference. Training the mind also means accepting monotony. This is where most men fail. They can handle intensity for a short time, but they can't handle boredom. Mental strength is built in boring moments, not dramatic ones. When nothing exciting is happening, when progress feels invisible, when there is no emotional reward. If you only perform when you feel inspired, you are not strong, you are dependent. Reps matter more than intensity. Showing up consistently at 70% beats showing up once at 100 and disappearing for weeks. The mind learns patterns, not promises. It doesn't care what you plan to do. It only records what you repeatedly execute. If your actions are inconsistent, your mind remains unreliable. The uncomfortable truth is this: you are mentally weak right now, not because you lack potential, but because you lack training volume. That should be empowering, not insulting. It means strength is available to you, but only through work you can't skip. No mindset trick replaces exposure. No speech replaces discipline. No belief replaces behavior. Every disciplined action is a signal you send to yourself. It says you can be trusted. Over time, those signals accumulate. Self-trust grows. Internal resistance shrinks. What people call confidence is often just the byproduct of proven self-control. You don't feel strong first and then act strong. You act strong long enough until strength becomes your default state. This is why mental strength is rare. Not because it's mysterious, but because it demands consistency without drama. Most men quit long before the training compounds. The few who don't become unrecognizable over time. Speed is seductive because it feels like power, but it is usually just impatience wearing confidence as a costume. Men who chase fast results are not aggressive thinkers. They are uncomfortable with delay. They want proof immediately because without proof, their belief collapses. That is not ambition. That is insecurity disguised as urgency. Anything that truly lasts moves slower than your ego would like. Look at anything in the real world that carries weight. Strong bodies, elite skill, unshakable authority, deep respect. None of it appeared quickly. The reason is simple and unforgiving: systems need time under pressure to stabilize. When growth happens too fast, weaknesses don't get exposed, they get hidden. And what is hidden eventually breaks. Fast progress skips the phase that actually builds dominance. It skips boredom. It skips doubt. It skips the slow burn where your mind is forced to sit inside discomfort without escape. That phase is not optional. It is where most men mentally collapse. They mistake the absence of excitement for the absence of progress and walk away. That decision alone explains why they never become formidable. Slowness is not weakness. Slowness is control. When you move slowly, you are forced to confront yourself every step of the way. There is no rush to distract you, no instant win to validate you, no shortcut to rescue your ego. You either stay disciplined or you don't. There is nowhere to hide. That exposure hardens a man. Men obsessed with speed rely on motivation. Motivation is unstable. It spikes, then crashes. Men who accept slow progress rely on systems. Systems don't care how you feel. They operate regardless of mood. That's why slow builders eventually dominate fast starters. When motivation fades, systems keep producing results. Speed also lies about mastery. You can achieve surface level competence quickly, but depth takes time. Real strength is not just performing when conditions are ideal, it is functioning when conditions are hostile. That level of capability only comes after repeated exposure to failure, correction, and adjustment. None of that can be rushed without breaking the process. The mind adapts at a slower rate than desire. This is where frustration is born. You want results before your nervous system is ready to handle them. When you force speed, you overload yourself and then quit, telling yourself it wasn't for you. In reality, you just refuse the timeline required to become capable. Slow progress also filters people out. That is its hidden advantage. When the path is long and unrewarding in the early stages, Only serious men remain. The impatient leave. The easily distracted leave. The validation seekers leave. What's left is a small group of men who can sit with delayed gratification without losing composure. Those men always end up ahead. Fast success often creates fragile identity. You haven't earned the outcome deeply enough to trust yourself with it. One setback and everything collapses. Slow success builds internal certainty. You know exactly what you're capable of because you've seen yourself endure months and years of pressure without breaking. That certainty cannot be shaken by external chaos. There is also a psychological shift that only happens with slowness. You stop needing constant feedback. You stop checking progress obsessively. You stop asking if it's working. You execute because execution has become who you are. At that point, progress accelerates naturally, but by then you are no longer obsessed with speed. You are obsessed with precision. Men who understand this stop chasing fast wins. They play long games. They invest where returns are delayed. They build habits that compound quietly. While others sprint and burn out, they keep moving forward unbothered, accumulating advantages. Years later, the gap is not small, it is humiliating. If you feel irritated by slow progress, that irritation is exposing something valuable. It's showing you where your discipline ends and your ego begins. Fix that, and speed will stop controlling you. Most men think discipline is about behavior. That's a surface-level understanding, and it's why their effort never lasts. They believe if they force themselves to act correctly for a short period, strength will follow automatically. It doesn't. Behavior is temporary. Identity is permanent. Discipline only becomes powerful when it stops being something you do and starts being something you are. You can copy disciplined actions for a day, a week, even a month. You can follow routines, schedules, and rules like a machine. But if your identity remains unchanged, the moment pressure increases or comfort becomes available, you revert. That relapse isn't failure. It's proof that discipline never moved deep enough. You were acting disciplined, not becoming disciplined. The mind is constantly asking one question before every action. Is this aligned with who I am? When the answer is no, resistance appears. When discipline feels heavy, forced, and draining, it means it hasn't been integrated into identity yet. You are still negotiating with yourself. Negotiation is weakness because it keeps the door open for excuses. Real discipline removes negotiation. It replaces should I with this is what happens. That shift doesn't come from motivation or inspiration. It comes from repetition under conditions that challenge your self-image. Every time you choose structure over impulse, you are casting a vote for a new version of yourself. One vote does nothing. Thousands create a new identity. This is why discipline must be boring to be effective. If it feels exciting, it's still external. It's still fueled by novelty. Identity-level discipline is quiet. It doesn't require emotional build-up. It doesn't need music, speeches, or hype. It executes automatically like muscle memory. That automation only comes after long exposure to consistency. Most men quit discipline right before it stops feeling hard. They interpret struggle as a signal that something is wrong. In reality, struggle is the transition phase. Your old identity is resisting replacement. It's fighting to survive. Comfort, laziness, and distraction aren't habits. They are identities trying to protect themselves. When discipline reshapes identity, your relationship with discomfort changes. You stop viewing it as punishment and start seeing it as normal. This is where control emerges. Not control over the world, but control over yourself. And self-control is the foundation of all other power. Without it, authority is fake. There is a reason disciplined men appear calm under pressure. They are not forcing themselves in the moment. They have already decided who they are long before the moment arrives. Their actions are pre-approved. Chaos doesn't confuse them because their identity doesn't change based on circumstances. Discipline that changes identity also eliminates dependence on external structure. You no longer need someone watching you. You don't need deadlines, threats, or consequences to function. You move because not moving would violate who you are. That internal standard is stronger than any external rule. This process cannot be rushed because identity resists sudden change. The mind protects familiarity, even when familiarity is destructive. Slow, consistent discipline bypasses that defense. It doesn't trigger panic. It doesn't create rebellion. It quietly replaces one pattern with another until the old self has no leverage left. Men who never reach this stage stay stuck cycling between bursts of effort and long periods of collapse. They call it lack of motivation. It isn't. It's lack of identity alignment. Once discipline becomes identity, effort decreases, consistency increases, and strength stabilizes. The men who master this stop asking how to stay disciplined. That question disappears. Discipline is no longer a tool they use. It is the operating system they run on. Most men lose before they ever take action, and they don't even realize it. The loss happens internally in the quiet moments where a decision should be made, and instead a conversation starts. That conversation is the problem. When your inner voice is allowed to debate, justify, and negotiate, authority disappears. Power cannot exist in a mind that asks permission from its emotions. Weak men speak to themselves in questions. Do I feel like it? Should I do this now? What if I wait? Every question hands control to comfort. Comfort always votes against progress. Strong men understand this early or learn it the hard way. The internal voice must function like a command center, not a discussion panel. A command system is simple, direct, and final. It does not explain itself. It does not seek reassurance. When an order is given, execution follows. This is how militaries function, how elite operators think, and how dominant men operate internally. The moment you allow emotional commentary, you dilute authority. Authority does not argue. Most people are uncomfortable with this idea because they've been trained to believe their feelings deserve equal representation. They don't. Feelings are data, not leadership. When feelings run the system, inconsistency becomes normal. One day you're disciplined, the next day you're not. One day you're confident, the next day you're hesitant. That instability is not personality, it's lack of internal hierarchy. When your inner voice becomes a command system, clarity replaces chaos. You no longer waste mental energy deciding what to do. The decision has already been made. This is why strong men appear calm. They are not thinking less, they are thinking once. Repeated decision-making drains power. Pre-decided standards conserve it. At first, issuing commands to yourself feels unnatural. You're used to persuasion, motivation, and emotional buildup. That discomfort is expected. You are dismantling years of mental conditioning that told you your mood matters more than your mission. Each time you give a command and follow through, you reinforce a new pattern. The mind learns quickly when disobedience is no longer tolerated. Negotiation is addictive because it creates the illusion of control. You feel involved, thoughtful, reasonable. In reality, you're delaying. Delay is weakness in disguise. Command eliminates delay. It forces immediacy. It forces responsibility. There is no room to hide behind logic when the order is clear. A command-based inner voice also changes how you experience pressure. When stress hits, there is no internal debate about whether you can handle it. The response is automatic. You move forward because that is the only available option. This is not aggression. It is certainty. Certainty is the highest form of mental strength. Men who never develop this internal command structure are easily manipulated by people, by circumstances, by their own impulses. They believe freedom means flexibility, but flexibility without structure becomes chaos. True freedom comes from self-imposed order. When you control yourself absolutely, nothing outside you has leverage. This internal authority does not make you rigid. It makes you reliable. You become someone who can be counted on by others, and more importantly, by yourself. Self-trust grows rapidly when your mind knows that commands will be obeyed. Doubt shrinks because doubt thrives on inconsistency. Over time, the inner voice sharpens. Commands become shorter, cleaner, less emotional. You don't need to convince yourself anymore. Convincing is for people who aren't in charge. You are. And when you are in charge internally, external dominance becomes a byproduct, not a performance. Most men will never experience this level of control because it requires them to silence a part of themselves they've been catering to their entire lives. The part that wants comfort, approval, and ease. That part does not disappear. It simply loses voting rights. When it does, the mind stops being a battlefield and becomes a weapon. Most men misread resistance as failure. The moment something starts to feel heavy, slow, or uncomfortable, they assume they're doing it wrong. That assumption is the reason they stay average. Resistance is not a warning sign. It is confirmation that you have left the comfort zone your mind was designed to protect. The mind resists anything that threatens its familiar patterns, even when those patterns are destructive. The first time resistance shows up, it feels personal. Fatigue increases. Doubt gets louder. Focus becomes harder. The work feels pointless. This is where weak men retreat and strong men pay attention. Resistance only appears when change is actually happening. If nothing inside you is being challenged, nothing is being built. Comfort is deceptive because it feels like peace. In reality, it's stagnation. When life feels smooth all the time, it means you are operating far below your capacity. Growth demands friction. Muscles grow by tearing. Skills grow by failure. The mind grows by enduring pressure without escaping. Remove resistance and you remove evolution. Most men quit not because the task is impossible, but because the resistance exposes their lack of internal structure. When things are easy, anyone can look disciplined. When resistance hits, your real operating system is revealed. Do you default to excuses, distractions, and delay, or do you stay present and execute anyway? That moment tells the truth about who you are. Resistance also strips away fantasy. Early on, motivation paints a glamorous picture of success. Resistance destroys that picture and replaces it with reality, repetition, boredom, and uncertainty. Many men were never committed to reality. They were committed to the fantasy. When the fantasy dies, so does their effort. There is a psychological shift that happens when you stop running from resistance. You stop asking when it will end. You stop waiting for things to feel better. You accept pressure as part of the environment, not a problem to solve. That acceptance alone increases your capacity. What used to feel overwhelming becomes manageable. What used to slow you down becomes background noise. Resistance also trains emotional neutrality. When you keep working despite discomfort, your emotional reactions lose influence. You stop overreacting to stress. You stop dramatizing difficulty. Calm becomes your default state, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. This is why resilient men look unbothered. They have simply normalized pressure. Avoiding resistance teaches the mind a dangerous lesson that discomfort is a threat. Every time you quit when things get hard, your brain remembers. Next time, resistance shows up faster and stronger. Over time, your tolerance shrinks. Life feels heavier even though you are doing less. This is how men become fragile without realizing it. Enduring resistance teaches the opposite lesson. It tells the mind that discomfort is survivable. That message compounds. Each time you stay in the work, despite friction, your threshold rises. What once required effort becomes automatic. What once felt unbearable becomes routine. This is not talent. It is conditioning. Resistance also reveals priorities. When something matters deeply, resistance doesn't stop you. It sharpens you. When something doesn't, resistance exposes the lack of commitment. This clarity is uncomfortable but valuable. It forces honesty. Many men would rather quit than admit they were never serious. There is no shortcut around resistance because resistance is the filter. It separates men who want results from men who want comfort. It cannot be bypassed, negotiated with, or outsmarted. It can only be endured. And every time you endure it, something inside you hardens in the right direction. The men who understand this stop fearing resistance. They stop labeling it as a bad sign. They recognize it immediately and adjust their posture. When resistance appears, they don't panic. They lock in. They know this is the part that matters. The loudest men in the room are rarely the strongest. Noise is often compensation, not confidence. Men who constantly announce their intentions, their discipline, their ambition are usually trying to convince themselves first. Real strength doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need acknowledgement. It doesn't even need to be understood. It operates whether anyone is watching or not. Certainty changes behavior in a way nothing else does. When a man is truly certain, he stops explaining himself. Explanation is a form of seeking approval. Strong men don't seek approval because they've already resolved the internal question of who they are. Once that question is settled, external opinions lose their power. Silence becomes natural, not strategic. Most people talk because they're unsure. They narrate their plans because they're afraid those plans won't survive pressure. Speaking out loud gives them temporary relief, a false sense of commitment. But words don't hold weight under stress. Only action does. Men who understand this conserve their energy. They let results speak, not promises. Quiet strength is built through repetition that no one sees. Early mornings, boring routines, decisions made when nobody is there to reward them. Over time, this creates internal alignment. There's no gap between what a man says and what he does because he stopped talking altogether. Alignment replaces performance. There is also a psychological advantage to silence. When you don't advertise your goals, you don't invite doubt, criticism, or comparison. You move freely. You adjust without embarrassment. You fail privately and learn quickly. Loud men are trapped by their own declarations. They become defensive when things don't go as planned. Quiet men stay fluid and dangerous. Certainty also changes how pressure is handled. When chaos hits, loud men react. They explain, justify, panic. Quiet men act. They don't need to convince themselves they can handle it. They already know. That knowledge wasn't built through confident speeches. It was built through repeated exposure to difficulty without quitting. This is why calm is intimidating. Calm signals control. Control signals power. When everyone else is emotional, reactive, and loud, the man who remains composed automatically rises in status. Not because he demands attention, but because attention is drawn to stability in unstable environments. Most men underestimate how much credibility silence creates. When you speak less, every word carries more weight. When you act consistently, people stop questioning your capability. They assume it. Assumption is authority without effort. You don't need to assert dominance when it's already recognized. There's also a deeper internal shift that happens. Quiet men are not suppressing emotion. They've mastered it. They've trained themselves not to react impulsively. Emotional restraint becomes instinctive. This doesn't make them passive. It makes them precise. Precision always beats intensity. Men who chase validation never reach this stage. They are addicted to feedback, likes, praise, recognition. Without it, they feel invisible. Quiet strength doesn't depend on visibility. It's self-sustaining. It exists even in isolation. That independence is what makes it rare. When certainty is real, there is no rush, no urgency to prove anything. Time becomes an ally instead of a threat. Loud men are always racing because deep down they're afraid of being exposed. Quiet men are patient because they know exactly what they're building and how long it takes. This is not about being mysterious or withdrawn. It's about internal resolution. Once you've settled who you are and what you do, noise becomes unnecessary. You don't posture. You don't flex. You execute. And execution done consistently creates a reputation that speaks long before you enter the room. Men who reach this level are often misunderstood early on. They're underestimated, overlooked. That doesn't bother them. They're not in a hurry to be recognized. They're in a process of becoming undeniable. When the results finally surface, there are no explanations, no speeches, no celebration, just presence. And presence, when backed by certainty, is impossible to ignore. So if you're frustrated that mental strength is taking time, good. That frustration is the fire doing its job. Stay in it. Don't rush it. Don't complain. Don't talk about it. Just keep building, slowly, relentlessly, silently, and understand this clearly. Men who endure the longest become the most dangerous, not loud, not flashy, dangerous. Because when pressure comes, they don't break, they don't panic, they don't beg, they execute. If you can't accept that this takes time, step aside. This path is not for you.